The year was 1809, and the village of Sizwe clung to the banks of the Lava River like a child to its mother's skirts. The water was the lifeblood of the people, its currents fed their crops, filled their gourds, and carried their songs during rituals under the swollen moon. But the river held secrets, too, whispered in the reeds and murmured in the ripples. The elders spoke of Mamlambo, the goddess of the deep, a creature of beauty and terror who claimed those foolish enough to disrespect her domain. Sizwe, a fisherman of 20 summers, scoffed at such tales. To him, the river was nothing more than fish and mud, a tool for his nets and his belly. Sizwe was broad-shouldered, his skin marked by the sun, his hands calloused from years of hauling twine. He lived alone in a small hut of wattle and daub, his parents long claimed by fever, his siblings scattered to other clans. The village respected him for his skill, his catches were always plentiful, but they muttered about his arrogance. "The river listens," old Mvula warned him one evening, her eyes milky with age. "Mamlambo hears your laughter. She'll come for you, boy!" Sizwe had grinned, showing his teeth. "Let her try! I'll hook her like a catfish and roast her over my fire!" That night, the air hung heavy, the sky a bruise of clouds hiding the stars. Sizwe sat by the riverbank, mending his nets under the flicker of a tallow lamp. The water lapped at the shore, a soft, rhythmic sound that lulled him into a half-dream. Then, a voice, low, melodic, like the hum of a distant song, broke the silence. "Fisherman," it called. Sizwe's head snapped up, his fingers tightening on the twine. The lamp's flame danced, casting shadows that stretched too long across the mud. "Who's there?" he demanded, standing. The river gleamed black under the cloud-choked sky, its surface unbroken. Yet the voice came again, closer now, curling around his ears like smoke. "Come to the water, fisherman! I've been watching you!" His heart thudded, but curiosity gnawed at him. He stepped forward, boots sinking into the damp earth, until he stood at the edge where the river kissed the land. There, rising from the shallows, was a woman. Her skin glistened like wet obsidian, her hair a cascade of midnight that clung to her shoulders. She wore no cloth, her body bare and perfect, water streaming from her curves as she waded toward him. Sizwe's breath caught. She was beautiful, too beautiful, like a dream carved from the night itself. "Who are you?" he managed, his voice rough. She smiled, her teeth sharp and white. "Call me Nandi," she said. "I live in the river. I've seen you work, Sizwe. You're strong. Brave. I like that." Her words were honey, sweet and thick, and though a shiver crawled up his spine, he couldn't look away. "Why hide in the water?" he asked, stepping closer despite himself. Her eyes, dark as the depths, held his. "The river is my home," she replied. "Will you join me tomorrow night? I'll show you its wonders." Sizwe hesitated. The elder's warnings flickered in his mind, Mamlambo, the deceiver, the devourer, but he pushed them aside. This was no goddess, just a woman, strange and bold. "Tomorrow," he agreed, and she slipped back into the water, vanishing without a ripple. The next day, the village buzzed with unease. A boy, Tabo, had gone missing. He'd been seen playing near the river at dusk, his laughter echoing until it stopped. The men searched the banks, their spears glinting in the sun, but found only his sandals, half buried in the mud. Mvula muttered prayers, tossing herbs into the water as an offering. "Mamlambo is hungry," she said, her voice trembling. Sizwe rolled his eyes. "A crocodile took him," he told the others. "Or he fell and drowned. The river doesn't eat people." That night, he returned to the bank, his lamp brighter this time, his knife tucked into his belt. Nandi was waiting, her form rising from the water as if summoned by his presence. She beckoned him closer, and he waded in, the cold biting his calves. "Follow me," she whispered, leading him along the shore to a bend where the river widened. The air grew thick, the scent of wet earth and decay pressing against his lungs. She pointed to the water, where fish darted in silver flashes. "See how generous the river is," she said. "It gives to those who please it." They sat together on a flat stone, her body close enough that he felt the chill radiating from her skin. She spoke of the river's depths, of caves lined with glowing stones, of secrets no man had seen. Her voice wove around him, hypnotic, and when she brushed her fingers against his arm, he didn't pull away. "You're not like the others," she murmured. "They fear the water. You master it." Pride swelled in his chest, drowning the unease that gnawed at his gut. For 3 nights, he met her. Each time, she drew him deeper, into the water, into her stories, into the strange pull of her gaze. The village grew quieter, its people huddling in their huts as more vanished, a woman fetching water, a hunter washing his spear. Footprints led to the river and stopped. Nomvula's chants grew louder, her offerings more desperate, goat blood, woven reeds, pleas for mercy. Sizwe ignored it all. Nandi was his secret, his prize, a beauty no myth could taint. On the 4th night, she took his hand. "Come with me," she said, her grip firm, her eyes glinting like polished stones. "I'll show you my home." The water reached his thighs as he followed, then his waist, then his chest. He should have turned back, the current tugged at him, the cold numbed his limbs, but her smile held him fast. She led him to a shadowed curve of the river, where the bank rose into a jagged cliff. A narrow crevice yawned in the rock, barely wide enough for a man. "Inside," she whispered, and slipped through. Sizwe hesitated. The air from the crevice smelled of rot, sharp and sour. His lamp flickered, nearly dying in the damp. But Nandi's voice called from within, soft and insistent, and he squeezed through, scraping his shoulders against the stone. The passage opened into a cavern, its walls slick with moisture, its ceiling lost in shadow. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of decay and something sweeter, like overripe fruit. Sizwe raised his lamp, and the light caught on patches of glowing green, algae, he thought, clinging to the rock. It cast an eerie sheen, illuminating the space in sickly hues. Nandi stood ahead, her back to him, her form still human, still perfect. "Welcome," she said, turning slowly. Her smile was wider now, too wide, her teeth longer than they should have been. The cavern stretched deeper, and as Sizwe stepped forward, his boot crunched on something brittle. He looked down and froze. Bones, human bones, littered the floor, some fresh with scraps of flesh, others yellowed and cracked. Skulls grinned up at him, their eye sockets empty, their jaws unhinged. His stomach churned, bile rising in his throat. "What is this?" he croaked, backing toward the crevice. Nandi's laugh echoed, sharp and cold. "My home," she said, stepping closer. The glow of the algae bathed her, and her skin shimmered, not with water, but with scales, iridescent and writhing. Her legs fused, her body lengthening, twisting into something serpentine. Her face stretched, her jaw unhinging, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Sizwe's lamp trembled in his hand, the light dancing across her monstrous form, a serpent, a goddess, a nightmare. But the worst was yet to come. As she slithered forward, the cavern wall seemed to shift. The green glow pulsed, and Sizwe saw them, faces, dozens of them, embedded in the rock. Tabo's wide eyes stared blankly, his mouth frozen in a scream. The woman who'd fetched water gazed out, her cheeks hollow. The hunter's snarling grimace glistened, wet and fresh. They weren't carvings, they were real, pressed into the stone like trophies, their flesh preserved by some unholy power. And they moved, slowly, subtly, their lips twitching, their eyes rolling toward him. "Momwambo," Sizwe whispered, the name choking him. She hissed, her tongue flicking, long and forked. "You called me Nandi," she said, her voice a guttural rasp now. "You thought me yours. But the river takes what it wants." She lunged, her coils snapping around his legs, pulling him down. The lamp fell, shattering, plunging the cavern into green-tinted darkness. Her claws raked his chest, drawing blood, and her face loomed close, her breath hot and rancid. Sizwe thrashed, his hands clawing at the bones beneath him. His fingers closed around a jagged femur, and with a scream, he drove it into her side. She shrieked, her grip loosening just enough for him to wrench free. He scrambled toward the crevice, her tail lashing behind him, smashing skulls to dust. The faces in the walls moaned, a chorus of agony, as he squeezed through, tearing his skin on the rock. Sizwe stumbled back to the village as dawn broke, his body bloodied, his mind fractured. The river lay still behind him, its surface a mirror reflecting the grey sky. He collapsed outside Nomvula's hut, gasping her name. She emerged, her eyes widening at the sight of him. "Momwambo," he rasped. "She's real! She took them! All of them!" The elders gathered, their faces grim. They burned herbs, chanted until their voices cracked, but Sizwe knew it was useless. The river had tasted him now. It wouldn't forget. That night, he lay in his hut, the darkness pressing against his eyes. Sleep came in fits, and with it, dreams, Nandi's face, beautiful and cruel, melting into scales, the caverns' faces, whispering his name, the river rising, swallowing the village whole. Days passed, then weeks. The disappearances stopped, but Sizwe was no longer the same. He abandoned his nets, refusing to touch the water. His hands shook, his laughter gone. At night, he heard her voice in the wind, calling him back. "Fisherman," it sang, "come to me." The villagers watched him waste away, his body thinning, his eyes hollow. One morning, they found his hut empty. His knife lay on the floor, his footprints leading to the riverbank, and stopping. Nomvula wept, scattering ashes into the current. "Momwambo has claimed her prize," she said. The river flowed on, silent and smug, its depths hiding the fishermen who dared to mock it. But in the village, the whispers grew. On moonless nights, they said, you could hear him, Sizwe's voice, faint and broken, rising from the water. "She's here," he moaned. "She's always here." And in the shadows of the lava, something moved, something beautiful and terrible, waiting for the next fool to step too close.